I was born March 10th, 1957, on a Sunday evening. In fact, my parents were hoping I would have been born on the 11th, because that was my grandfather's birthday. And oddly enough, I have his name, George. So that's where I first started. And my parents came from Alabama, Talladega, Alabama. They came up in 1950, and I was, again, born in 57. When they first came to town, they were first on the west side on Bain Street, and then eventually my grandparents came up and they had a boarding house over on Clinton Street, which was right around the corner from the Michigan Street Baptist Church. Every time I say Michigan Street, I flow the other way. So, and actually, my parents were the youngest two deacon and deaconess in that church, as well as, they were Sunday school teachers there. And this was when Reverend Nash was the Reverend. And then from there, as the church got more popular and they had a lot of services, a lot of the younger members wanted to move into a bigger church, but the older members wanted to stay there. So you had a split, so the new pastor, which was Reverend Phillips, would lead the new young membership over to Humboldt Parkway. And pretty much I know more about Humboldt church life than I did, because again, I was just a baby over there. Well, first year or two I was at Public School 74. But, things, the students were pretty rough on the teachers, because they usually would have, young kids right out of college trying to teach, and these kids, they just, murdered them, so to speak. So I ended up going to St. Vincent de Paul, which was a Catholic school on Main Street, right next to Canisius College. So we went there from like second grade till we graduated. And then from there, I went on to Bishop Fallon, which was on Main Street, in that high school there. And that was a nice school. It was an all-boys school. And when I graduated out of there, I ended up coming back up Main Street to Canisius. So all my schools were on Main Street. My younger brother, Jeffrey, he was born like 11 months after me. We both went to 74 initially, and then he went on to, and St. Vincent, then he went on to McKinley High School, and then from McKinley, he went into the Navy. My older brother, now he went to, like I said, our first years or so, they were on the west side, so he went to schools over there, and then from there, he went to Hutch Tech, and then he was at UB, and then from UB, he went into the service too. In fact, they both went into the Navy. Oddly enough, my father was a Navy guy, so my family's all Navy. Well, I would just say, talking about the history of this place, the club, Buffalo, and, this our role in it as African Americans. Well, the club was sort of like a second home for me. The Colored Musicians Club of Buffalo, New York. I mean, most of these guys, they were older gentlemen, but they were very, accepting and caring, and, they took care of us. They taught us all the tricks. I mean, if I paid what they taught me, I couldn't afford it, but that's how good they were. And, they were just community-minded group of guys. And, I would find out later that when they started a credit union, not only was it there for the membership, but they eventually would offer it to the community. They had an insurance policy that would also be handed out to the community. They did a lot of stuff for the churches and the schools and stuff. And so as I got good enough to go with some of these bands, we would play at a lot of community functions. Just to play it, for the community. So it was fun just to be a part of that. Well, with segregation, black musicians couldn't join the local, which back then it was known as 43. But in 1917, February the 3rd, the men and women of color here in Buffalo would finally have their own local, and it would be known as Local 533. And for about 18 years, they didn't have a permanent home. They would either be at somebody's home or a nightclub or at one point even a mosque. And then eventually in 1934, that building 145 Broadway would be available for purchase. It was actually a German shoemaker's building, and Lloyd Plummer at the time was renting downstairs. So he was offered the building, went back to the membership, they voted to get the building. And then in 1935, July 25th, they would incorporate the Colored Musicians Club, and that would be the name that would go on the title and the deed. And they did that because they had foresight that they knew that one day the merger of both Black and White Union would take place. And the fact that the white local was a bigger membership than 45 to 33, they knew they probably would lose the building. So by putting the club's name on it, it saved the building from being taken away. Yes. Well, we're doing a combination of renovations and putting an addition on the rear of the building with an elevator. So we want to make sure that our elder members, as well as just anybody in general, can get upstairs to hear the live music through that elevator. And then with the renovations, that's going to, secure that building for at least another 100 years. Museum is going to be updated. Typically, you like to update a museum every 10 years at a time. So it's going to be some new high-tech stuff that the kids are going to really love. But it's also going to be another way to tell the story even more effectively. Like I said, my grandfather played guitar, which, of course, my dad did for a little bit. My brother played trumpet. So my younger brother and myself, we got into it, and we first started out playing guitar. In fact, we would take lessons every Saturday, this music store on Fillmore, next to or near Urban Street. It was a white Polish guy, and we'd go upstairs and we would play. And we did that for a while. And then, again, as I got a little older, my brother was playing in the high school band at Hutz Tech, and he was playing second trumpet. And he started bringing these jazz albums home. And in one particular day, I heard this one saxophone playing, and the speed and I guess tonality was so interesting. It almost sounded like a bird flying around in a room. So I went to my brother and I said, wow. I said, what's that? And he said, that's a saxophone. I said, wow. He said, it sounds like a bird, And he said, well, that's the name of the guy who's playing the horn, So at that point, I went to a pawn shop and I got myself a saxophone and I started playing. So I started first as listening to the records and kind of mimicking what I heard. But then eventually I said, I need to learn this right and take lessons. So where I went to get my reeds, which was a store on Franklin called McCullen's. And Mr. Schwartz was the owner. And he pointed to this black gentleman that was looking at some horns, and he introduced himself as Mr. Graff Young. And Graff, he taught English over at McKinley High School. So he said, I'll be glad to teach you. And so I would go over to his place, and which was right across from the zoo, and we would practice on Saturday, and I learned a lot. And he really grilled me on reading. And he grilled me on speaking proper English too. So it was a combination. So you couldn't just slip on your speaking and playing. But he was just really a fantastic guy. And then he would tell me stories about the club, the history, and who was there and stuff. And I was like, wow. So then one day he said, you know what? They do a workshop on Saturdays. Now there was a place, it was an African cultural shop on the corner of Utica and Main Street. It was, they sold African artifacts and clothes and stuff. But down in the basement, they had a group of the guys would go down and they would just play charts and stuff. And so I went in there with Graf, and he introduced me to the gentleman who was running the program. And he introduces himself as Mr. Al Tenney. And then he had Sabu Aliola playing bass, and Balar Abdul on the saxophone. And then everybody else was members from the club, young guys and old guys, you know. And I mean, it would be like 16 tenor players, you know, 8 alto players, and on and on. And I mean, these guys were jamming. And so, you know, I got in there and I was playing with them and stuff, and it was great. I enjoyed going there every Saturday. So eventually some of the guys in there were band leaders. So they were saying, hey, you need to come down to the club and sit in with the bands, you know. So one of the first bands I got to sit in with over there was Willie Dorsey's big band. You know, he called it the Last Word Jazz Researchers. And I mean, it was fun, and I just got to sit in there, and I sat in between a Mr. Art Anderson and a Mr. Charlie Reedy. And between their stories of the road and stuff, you know, they would just teach me on, you know, how to play certain phrases in a song and different things like that. So I learned a lot just sitting in between them. And it was a good time, but I wasn't officially a band member yet. I was just there for the rehearsals. I didn't really have too many challenges, you know. I mean, I played, and ironically, back in the 70s, I mean, there was a lot of horn bands, you know, Tower Power and stuff like that. So playing the saxophone wasn't like taboo or something that people would, you know, turn their nose up to. So that wasn't really an issue. So I didn't have that, you know. That was really not a problem. Well, I would have to say that knowledge is king, because most of the time, the people that are throwing the racist words at you and stuff are stupid. But when you can throw facts back at them, it kills them, you know, because when you show knowledge, knowledge is power. Now, I thought that was just a saying, but in actuality, it is. And you'd be surprised when you make somebody foolish how fast you can shut them up. Probably one of the most important things, at least to me, we're going to get back into doing those lessons again. You know, due to between COVID and then with the construction, we've just been down for a while. But once we get back up, you know, we're going to reach out to the schools and everything and try to get some of our kids back into playing. Because I think they need a place to come to where, one, they can have a good time, 2, be safe, and 3, be productive and creative. And besides teaching instruments, you know, we'll hopefully want to get into maybe dance to go along with the music. You know, have kids, teach them how to be sound engineers so they can record what they do up there, and just really build a whole culture of music and dance and artistic stuff up there, as well as just teaching them their history, you know, and being a part of the corridor. Not only would it be about the music, but we'll talk about the civil rights that took place there. We're talking about, you know, what we did to get into politics there, and a lot of the accomplishment that we did that became nationwide from Buffalo. Yeah, you know, because you go to South Buffalo, there's things there for those kids to look at and say, yeah, that's me. West Side, the same thing. Yeah, that's me. We're the only culture that we don't have anything really to look at. You know, yeah, we got that bust of Martin Luther King, but does that look like Martin Luther King to you? You know, I mean, we want symbols and places that they can point at and look to and say, yeah, that's me too. You know, that's my heritage, and you know, that's my culture. And I mean, even you go across the country, you may find little bits here and there, but these kids, they need to know their history. And I think if they know their history, they will feel more empowered to stand up to racism